She's out there somewhere. I know she is. And I don't know if I'll find her in time. That thought follows me everywhere. Through the rocket launches and the board meetings and the late nights, staring at engineering problems that nobody has ever solved before. Through the moments when everything is working exactly the way it should, when the numbers are right and the trajectory is perfect, and by every external measure, life is extraordinary, that thought still finds me, quietly, in the spaces between everything else. Where is she? Will I meet her before it's too late? People look at my life and they see the companies, the wealth, the 14 children, the headlines that follow me like a second shadow. They see Elon Musk the builder, the disruptor, the man who decided the rules of physics were more of a suggestion than a law. I understand why they see it that way. I've worked hard to build that image, harder maybe than I've worked at anything else. But there's something underneath all of it that I've never quite figured out how to solve. Something that doesn't respond to more effort or more capital or more sheer will. And it's this. I don't know how to hold love without also being terrified of losing it. I've been married. Twice, technically. I've had children with women I cared about deeply. I've felt that thing that happens when someone walks into a room and the noise in your head gets quieter. I know what that feels like. I've chased that feeling across decades and continents and versions of myself. And every single time something goes wrong. Not always with screaming and lawyers, though some of it has gone that way too. Sometimes it just quietly falls apart, and I'm left in a very large, very empty house wondering what I am that makes this so difficult. Let me take you back to the real beginning. Not Tesla, not SpaceX, not any of it. Pretoria, South Africa. A kid who read every book in the public library because books didn't push you downstairs. Books didn't leave you bleeding on the school hallway floor. Books didn't put you in the hospital. I was that kid. Too smart and too strange for a place that had no use for either. I got beaten badly enough that my face looked different coming out of it than going in, and I went home to a father who was, by my own description, evil. Not a difficult man, not a complicated man, evil. I've used that word deliberately. I mean it every time. Elon Musk is my father, and I chose to live with him after my parents divorced when I was around 9 or 10. Why? I've asked myself that question more times than I can count. Maybe I thought I was strong enough to handle it. Maybe I believed that if I stayed close enough, if I was good enough and smart enough and impressive enough, eventually he would become someone worth having as a father. That belief, that if you try hard enough the person in front of you will finally see your worth, that belief followed me out of that house and into every relationship I've ever had. It is the most expensive belief I've ever carried, and I carried it for a very long time without knowing it was there. When I met Justine at Queen's University in Canada, sometime in the early 90s, I thought I had found the answer. She was brilliant. A real writer, not performing the idea of being one but actually doing it, with talent that was entirely her own. I pursued her aggressively in the way that I pursue everything aggressively. I showed up at her door. I called when she didn't call back. I was completely certain, and I am almost never completely certain about anything. I model outcomes. I question assumptions. I run probabilities on everything. But with her, I was not running any calculations. I was just certain. We got married in January 2000. And I walked into that marriage carrying everything I had learned about love from a childhood in that house with that man. I just didn't know I was carrying it. That's the thing about the weight you've been carrying since you were a child. You stop feeling it because it just becomes the way your body moves through the world. You think everyone walks this heavy. You think the tension you feel in close spaces is just what intimacy feels like. At our wedding reception while we were dancing, I told Justine that I was the alpha in the relationship. She thought I was joking. I was not joking. Not because I was cruel, but because some part of me genuinely believed that control was the same thing as stability. That if I could manage the shape of our life together precisely enough, I could prevent it from breaking. I had watched everything break when I was a kid. The family, the safety, the basic assumption that home is a place where nothing terrible happens. I was not going to let that happen again. And so I tried to control everything. The way she engaged socially, the way she spent her time, and I told myself this was love. I told myself that caring this much about every detail meant I was invested, present, devoted. What Justine experienced was something different. She experienced a man who told her that if she were his employee, he would fire her. She experienced a husband whose mind was somewhere else even when his body was in the room. She experienced someone who, when our first son Nevada died of SUDS at 10 weeks old, when this tiny person we had made together stopped breathing and the world became unrecognizable, she experienced a husband who could not understand why she needed to grieve openly. I called it emotionally manipulative. I look back at that now and I don't recognize the person who said it. But I also understand him completely. He was terrified. Grief that size, loss that sudden. It was a hole with no bottom. And I had spent my entire life learning that the way you survive a bottomless hole is to not look at it. Keep moving. Keep building. Keep your face pointed forward. The problem is you cannot ask someone to love you fully, while also refusing to feel anything fully. You cannot ask someone to be your partner, while only allowing yourself to show up as the invulnerable version. Justine wanted conversations that went deep. She wanted to be seen. She wanted a husband whose mind was actually present when his body was in the room. What I gave her was the version of me I had decided was safe to show. The competent one. The driven one. The one who had it all under control. She has written about what it felt like to become a trophy wife she never agreed to be. About the growing emptiness at the center of a marriage that looked successful from the outside. And when things finally reached the breaking point in 2008, when Tesla and SpaceX were both on the edge of collapse, and I was carrying a weight that could have crushed any person, I gave her an ultimatum. Either we fix this marriage today or I divorce you tomorrow. And the next morning I filed. I have thought about that moment many times. The way I handled the end of my marriage to Justine says more about where I actually was emotionally than anything I built during those years. When you're in pain and you don't know how to sit with pain, you issue ultimatums. You create false deadlines. You convince yourself that the problem needs to be solved on your timeline, because if you slow down enough to actually feel it, the whole thing might come apart. So you keep moving. You keep making decisions. You file the paperwork. And you tell yourself you're being decisive. What I was actually doing was running. Tallulah Riley came into my life shortly after. She was 22. I was 37. And she has said things about me publicly that still stop me cold. Because they contradict everything I believed about how I showed up in relationships. She has said I am the most emotional person she knows. That the idea that I am cold or emotionless could not be further from the truth. And she is right, in a way that I think confused both of us. Because the emotion is real. The feeling is completely real. I feel things at an intensity that is genuinely difficult to describe. But feeling intensely and being emotionally available are not the same thing. You can feel everything and still keep all of it somewhere the other person can never reach. And that is what I was doing. We married in September 2010, divorced in 2012, remarried in 2013. I filed for divorce again in 2014, then withdrew it, then finalized it in October 2016. Look at that pattern. Look at it honestly. This wasn't a relationship without love. Tallulah has called me the love of her life. I believe she meant it. But we kept reaching a point where the gravitational pull of my work, the sheer consuming mass of what I was trying to build, would pull everything else out of orbit. She would be standing in the same house as me, and I would be somewhere on Mars. Not metaphorically. Literally running simulations in my head about interplanetary colonization, while the person who loved me was right there needing me to be right there. Tallulah understood something that I couldn't fully receive at the time. She understood that my ambition was not separate from my wounds. That the relentlessness, the inability to stop or slow down or be present in a room without also solving a problem in that room, those were not just personality traits. They were armor. They were the way I had learned to survive. Keep moving fast enough and nothing can land on you. Build enough and maybe the emptiness doesn't have room to breathe. The problem is the emptiness always has room to breathe. I have proven that more times than I would like. somewhere in 2016, during those final months with Tallulah. I was also briefly with Amber Heard. It was short and complicated and genuinely felt on both sides. She described it positively afterward, and so did I in the limited way I've addressed it. But the timing of it tells you something true about where I was. When things start to fall apart, my instinct is not to sit with the falling. My instinct is to reach for the next thing that might stop the fall, not because I'm calculating, because I'm scared. And scared people move fast in the direction of anything that promises relief. This is the pattern that nobody fully named to me until Grimes did, and when she named it with a precision that was deeply uncomfortable to absorb. I met Claire, who the world knows as Grimes, at the Met Gala in 2018. She was unlike anyone I had ever been drawn to before. Strange and brilliant and genuinely original in a way that felt entirely unperformed. She existed at the intersection of art and technology in a way that made her feel like someone from a version of the future I was trying to build. And I fell for her with the same totality I bring to everything I do. Our relationship was chaotic from the beginning. We had 3 children together. XDA she, who was born in May 2020. Exa born in December 2021. Tao born in 2022. Children I love with everything I have. But Claire said something to Walter Isaacson for his biography of me that I have sat with more than almost anything else anyone has ever said about my inner life. She said that I associate love with being treated badly, that I'm attracted to chaos. And she said it was about my father, about what I grew up with, that I am quick to fall back into being treated badly because on some level, that is what love has always felt like to me. That is what it trained me to expect, because the first love I ever experienced was conditional and volatile and frequently painful. And when you learn love that way, you spend the rest of your life gravitating towards situations that reproduce that feeling. Not because you want to be hurt, but because familiarity reads as safety even when it isn't safe at all. I want you to understand what that means when you're the one living it. It means that when something is genuinely healthy and stable and good, some part of you doesn't trust it. It feels too quiet. It feels like the calm before something breaks. So you create the drama yourself. Or you choose partners where the drama is already built in. Or you pour yourself so completely into work that the relationship can't survive the competition, which creates the very chaos you were trying to avoid. But at least it's chaos you caused. At least it's familiar. Control is the word underneath all of it. The need for control that looks like decisiveness. That looks like vision. That looks like strength. But in an intimate relationship, control is the enemy of the thing you're trying to build. You cannot control someone into genuinely choosing you. You cannot engineer your way to intimacy. And I have spent years trying to do exactly that, with exactly the results you would expect. There is also Shivan Zilis, a brilliant executive at Neuralink, who is now the mother of 4 of my children. Twin Strider and Azure, born in November 2021, Arcadia, born in February 2024, and Selden, who arrived in early 2025. This is not a traditional romantic partnership in any recognized sense. We are co-parents. We appear together publicly with our children. She holds a real and significant place in the world I have built. But even here, in an arrangement that defies easy categorization, you can see the same engine running underneath. The need to be connected, the need to not be alone, the need to create family, because family is the thing I have been trying to get right since I was a child watching mine come apart. I have at least 14 children as of early 2026. 14. And I am single. Sit with that for a moment, not to judge it, but to actually see it clearly, because what it reveals, if you're willing to look, is a man with an extraordinary capacity for wanting closeness and an equally extraordinary difficulty actually sustaining it. I have created family in every direction. I have brought more lives into the world that carry my name and my DNA than almost anyone of my generation. And I sit with my kids on the nights I have them, and they are the best thing about my life. Genuinely, every single one of them. But when they go home, I'm in a very large, very quiet house. Lex Fridman asked me once if I got lonely, and I told him sometimes that my kids and friends keep me company, that there are many nights I sleep alone. And then I said something I have thought about many times since. I said I don't have to sleep alone, but I do. Why? That is the question that doesn't have a clean answer. The same man who moves at the speed I move at, who fills every available space with activity and ambition and output, who has built companies that are genuinely changing the trajectory of civilization, chooses to sleep alone on nights when he doesn't have to. And the only honest answer I can give is that somewhere deep in the machinery of how I was built, being fully let in by another person is still the most frightening thing I can imagine. Because if you let someone fully in, they can fully leave. And I know what that feels like. I knew what it felt like before I was 10 years old. My parents' marriage ended. My father's love was a thing you had to earn constantly and could lose without warning for reasons that were never entirely clear. Every relationship since then has carried that original terror inside it, even when I couldn't name it, even when I was certain I had outgrown it. The researchers who study this, the psychologists who look at the arc of a life and try to understand what shaped it, they have a name for what I carry. A 2025 peer-reviewed study specifically examined my life through an attachment theory framework and concluded that I likely developed what they call an anxious, avoidant attachment style, the product of a childhood where the people who were supposed to be your safe harbor were instead the primary source of danger. What you learn in that environment is that closeness is not safe, that love is conditional, that the way to survive is to be impressive enough that people have to keep you around while never letting your guard down far enough that, when they leave, the fall kills you. You want connection desperately, and you are terrified of it in equal measure. So you oscillate. You pull people in and then push them away. You show up with everything you have and then retreat behind your work. You create situations where the relationship eventually ends, which confirms what you always believed, which is that it was going to end anyway. And in some terrible way, the ending feels like proof that you were right to be afraid. I have done this. I have done this more times than I want to count. And I have done it with people who genuinely loved me. That's the part that is most painful to sit with honestly. Not that the relationships ended, but that they ended the way they did, with brilliant, real, whole women on the other side of them who had tried to reach me and found a wall where a person should have been. Justine tried to tell me. She said she was my wife, not my employee. She was right. She said she longed for intimacy and empathy. She was asking for the thing I most wanted to give and least knew how to give. I responded by finding ways to diminish her, by having my judgment override hers in decisions about her own life. That is not love. That is fear wearing the costume of authority. And when I finally couldn't manage the situation anymore, when the pressure of 2008 became too heavy and Tesla was almost dead and SpaceX had just failed its third launch and I was carrying more than any one person should be asked to carry, I gave her an ultimatum and filed the next morning, not because she had failed, because I had run out of capacity to hold the fear and the pressure simultaneously. Something had to go, and I chose the most intimate thing. Because the most intimate thing is always the most terrifying thing. And when we are terrified, we often destroy the thing that frightens us most and call it a decision. If you are watching this and you recognize something in that, if you have ever given someone an ultimatum that was really about your own terror rather than their behavior, if you have ever ended something real because staying required you to be vulnerable in a way that felt unsurvivable, I want you to hear this. You are not alone in that. The instinct to end the thing you love before it can end you is one of the most human instincts there is, but it will cost you everything if you keep following it. I have paid for it. I have paid for it across marriages and relationships, and in the eyes of children who deserve more of their father's actual presence and less of his headlines. I am not telling you this from a place of resolution. I am telling you this from inside it. From a place where I still don't fully know how to be still long enough to let someone in all the way. Where the work is still the thing I reach for when the feeling gets too large. Where there are nights I choose to sleep alone. Not because I have to, but because being alone is the one space where nothing can abandon me. Here is what I have come to understand, though. And I want to be honest about the fact that understanding something and consistently living it are two very different things. The emptiness I have been trying to fill with companies and launches and children and relationships that move at the speed of a SpaceX trajectory. That emptiness was never about the absence of the right person. It was about the presence of something I haven't fully faced. The kid in Pretoria who learned that love was something you survived rather than something you rested in. Who built walls so fast and so strong that even the people who loved him couldn't find the door. There is a version of my life where I did that internal work earlier, where I had sat with someone qualified in a room without distractions and actually stayed long enough to feel the thing I've been running from since I was 9 years old, where I had let Justine grieve our son and grieved with her instead of labeling her pain as manipulation, where I had been present for Tallulah as a husband rather than as a person in permanent parallel orbit, where I had given Grimes the stability she deserved rather than cycling back into the chaos she eventually named so precisely. I don't know exactly what that version of my life looks like, but I know it has fewer people who reached for me and found a performance instead of a person. I posted something on X in February of 2026 that I meant with everything I have. I wrote that you cannot understand love until you have experienced true love, that it is something outside the capacity of explanation unless you have felt it. I believe that completely. I believe it because I have seen it in the faces of my children. Every single one of them. When I am with them, I know exactly what love is. I know it without any armor. The love I have for my children is the truest thing in my life, the least defended, the most honest. And what that tells me, the thing I am still in the process of absorbing, is that I am capable of it. The full thing. The unguarded, completely present, entirely real version. I can do it. I do it with them. Which means the question is not whether I'm capable of love. The question is why it is so much harder with a partner than with a child. And the answer, if I am honest about it, is that a child cannot leave you the way a partner can. A child cannot decide one day that you are not enough and find someone who is. The love between a parent and a child has a permanence that romantic love does not automatically carry. And for someone who has been braced for abandonment since before he was 10 years old, permanence is the only context in which love feels truly safe. But I am 54 years old, and I am single. And somewhere out there is a woman who is brilliant and grounded, and who has done enough of her own work that she doesn't need me to complete her. Who has her own life that is already full, who is not looking for someone to rescue her, or impress her or fund her vision for her, but for someone to build alongside. Someone who can receive the intensity I bring without being consumed by it. Who understands that the man behind the rockets and the companies in the timeline breaking announcements is also the kid from Pretoria who still has to consciously remind himself that love is not something you earn through achievement. That being present is enough. That being honest is enough. That showing up as the actual person, rather than the invulnerable performance, is not weakness. It is the only real foundation any of this can be built on. I want to meet her. I genuinely do. Not to fill an emptiness. I have children and work in a mission that gives my life more purpose than I ever could have imagined when I was that kid sitting alone in a library, reading everything he could find. I am not looking for someone to complete me. I am looking for someone to be real with. To sit across from at the end of a day that changed something in the world and say this is who I actually am. Not the version in the headlines. Not the performance. This one. The one who gets it wrong sometimes and doesn't always have the answer and would rather have one honest conversation than 1,000 impressive ones. The one who is still, at 54, figuring out how to let someone in without preparing for the moment they leave. If you are watching this, and you are in the middle of your own version of this story, if you have been building and achieving and filling every available moment with noise, because the quiet is too loud, if you have been choosing people who can't fully choose you back, because being fully chosen feels more dangerous than being alone, if you have been performing the version of yourself you think is lovable instead of showing up as the version that actually is, I want you to hear something directly. The work you are running from is the only work that matters. Not the company, not the launch, not the number, not the scale of the ambition. The work of actually knowing yourself. The work of sitting with the thing you have been afraid of since you were a child, and finally looking at it without flinching. That work. It is the hardest thing I know of. And from where I stand right now, at this age with this history, it is the only thing I genuinely wish I had started sooner. If this hits something real for you, subscribe. Come back. These are the conversations that matter to me, not the achievements. The truth that lives underneath them. I said at the beginning that she is out there somewhere. I still believe that. But I am learning, slowly, in the way that people who move fast learn slow things, that the question is not only where is she and will I find her in time,